Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. On Capitol Hill today, lawmakers are showing a laser focus on countering the generational threat by the Chinese Communist regime. NTD's Melina Wisecup is on Capitol Hill with more details. Melina, what are some of the actions members of Congress are taking when it comes to China?
U.S.-China relations is definitely a strong bipartisan topic here on Capitol Hill, and we saw that bipartisanship on full display today. Lawmakers held multiple hearings with regards to China, anywhere from the Science and Tech Committee holding hearings to address the tech competition with China, and then there are other committees addressing the economic and trade practices between the U.S. and China, as well as addressing international issues like the U.S. asserting more support for Taiwan in the face of increasing CCP aggression against the region. Now, why is China such a pressing issue for lawmakers on Capitol Hill? Well, here's the chairman of the Select Committee on China commenting on it earlier today.
Do we want to live in an Orwellian world of totalitarian techno control, a world that looks like Xinjiang light, or do we want to live in the free world where we are free from fear of repression, free to choose our own future?
I wanted to know, what are Congress members' top priorities for addressing China? And here's what some lawmakers told me.
Certainly, China's possible engagement with Russia on the war in Ukraine. We see that as a grave threat and a grave danger to global order. So that'll be number one.
My bill will be coming up that deals with organ harvesting, forced organ harvesting. And the fact that the Chinese Communist Party under Xi Jinping is murdering between 60 to 100,000 average age 28-year-old men and women in China, Uyghurs, Falun Gong practitioners, to steal their organs is something that is Nazi-like and barbaric. So our bill would hold to account in that supply chain.
And why should Americans care that organs are being harvested in China?
Well, anyone who does get a transplantation should be very aware of its source to ensure that that person voluntarily offered their organ, be a heart, liver, or whatever it might be, that they were indeed dead at the time of the organ transplant. But in China, everything is reversed. They go and pick and cull, as they call it, these very healthy people. And the Falun Gong practitioners are extraordinarily healthy because of their religious practices, because of their lifestyle. So they become victimized by the Chinese Communist Party as the victims to steal their organs.
Where there are violations of human rights, I think that the United States and all nations have a obligation to speak up.
And combating forced organ harvesting is one of the many bills that the Foreign Affairs Committee marked up today. Many of those bills are expected to gain strong bipartisan support when the House brings them up for a full floor vote later this Congress. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
NTD's Melina Wisecup reporting from Capitol Hill. And the White House sets a deadline to purge TikTok from all government devices. This as a powerful House panel moves to give President Biden the authority to ban the Chinese app even more broadly. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
The Biden administration is giving federal agencies 30 days to make sure they don't have TikTok on any government devices. This according to new guidance on Monday from the Office of Management and Budget, which says the new deadline is part of the administration's commitment to protecting the American people's privacy and security. The White House on Tuesday would not specify if President Biden would support a larger TikTok ban, but it said the administration is looking closely into the Chinese app through the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S.
So we've been clear about our concerns about apps like TikTok. As you know, there's a CFIUS review that's ongoing, and we're looking at what else we might be able to do, including working with Congress.
But while the administration is scrutinizing TikTok, the GOP-controlled House is not waiting for them to act. The House Foreign Affairs Committee on Tuesday passed a bill that would give President Biden the authority to ban TikTok. Here's the committee's chairman, Michael McCall, on the legislation.
But the time has come to protect our children from the PRC, from the Chinese Communist Party putting a back door in their phones.
The bill, if enacted, would revise previous protections that have shielded distributors of foreign creative content like TikTok from U.S. sanctions. That means it could effectively ensnare not just TikTok,
but also sanction companies that engage under the PRC mandate in espionage.
And Congressman Michael McCall tells NTD that he believes there is support for the bill in the Biden administration, especially given a growing awareness of Beijing's threats.
Even within this administration, all the national security leaders know what a threat it is. It's a backdoor into your iPhone or your phone, and I look at it as a Chinese spy balloon in your phone.
And Congressman Brian Mast echoing such concerns.
It means that they work socially through movies, through TikTok, through influencing what you could say pop culture to make people more favorable to China.
While the bill is expected to pass the House, its fate is less certain in the Senate. And when asked recently if he supports a larger TikTok ban, President Biden says at least he doesn't have it on his phone. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
The Supreme Court today hearing challenges to President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. Supporters of the plan protested in front of the court for hours, starting last night.
President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan would cancel between $10,000 and $20,000 of debt for eligible borrowers. Biden introduced the plan last summer, but a lower court halted it in November. No debt has been canceled yet. If the plan goes through, around $400 billion of debt would be canceled. Chief Justice John Roberts on Tuesday pointed out that the executive branch usually doesn't have the power to do that.
Most casual observers would say if you're going to give up that much amount of money, if you're going to affect the obligations of that many Americans on a subject that's of great controversy, they would think that's something for Congress to act on.
The Biden administration says it has the power to forgive the loans thanks to a rule put in place in 2003. The rule in question is the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act, or HEROES Act. It was passed after 9/11 and grants the Secretary of Education the power to waive or modify a federal student loan program. The idea is to protect borrowers in the case of military operations and national emergencies. The Biden administration argues that the COVID-19 pandemic is such a national emergency. In Tuesday's hearing, a group of Republican-led states argued that Biden is just using the pandemic to fulfill his campaign promise to erase student loan debt. Justice Neil Gorsuch explained an aspect of unfairness in the plan.
People who've paid their loans, people who have planned their lives around not seeking loans, and people who are not eligible for loans in the first place, and that $500 billion is being diverted to one group of favored persons over others.
Several groups supporting student loan forgiveness protested in front of the High Court. One of the speakers was Democratic California Representative Jimmy Gomez. He advocated for debt forgiveness, saying he's still paying off his student loan debt, as you can see in this clip.
Out of all the members of Congress, people think that we're all wealthy, maybe we're well off, but I still owe $45,000 in student loan debt for my time in undergrad and graduate school. I paid off almost $100,000. Now I'm working on the last $45,000. But not everybody is so fortunate.
Most judges on Tuesday reportedly seemed skeptical of Biden's plan to forgive student debt. A decision from the High Court is expected by late June. Reporting by Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Joining us next to discuss the COVID pandemic, we have Rick Maida, healthcare law professor at Georgetown University. Maida is also an entrepreneur, pharmacist, and former candidate for the United States Senate in New Jersey, and we are happy to have him on to discuss. Rick Maida, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Rick, we have the COVID lab leak theory here appearing to have been validated, at least the possibility that it was leaked from the laboratory in Wuhan. What do you make of this seemingly sudden turnaround?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that the federal agencies are finally recognizing what Americans, the global community, have known for a long time. Really, the true question here is, was it leaked accidentally or was it leaked on purpose?
So, Rick, why do you think this idea initially was suppressed, and how did the media's initial dismissal of the lab leak theory affect the public's perception of the pandemic in general?
Well, there was a lot of effort by the Chinese Communist Party to push sort of this misinformation, disinformation out to the public for fear of retaliation and retribution against China, its tourism, and its economy. And this isn't new. We've seen this even back 10 years ago when we had H1N1, bird flu, SARS, and other viruses coming out of China, where there was this push to downplay and mute the involvement of the Chinese government with these viruses, or from the fact that they stemmed from China because it impacted their tourism. WHO has been very critical about labeling anything from Chinese origin. And so, it's been this push by the Chinese government to make sure to protect their economy first and not have any ties back to China if that truly was the origin. Now, remember, when COVID first started, there was this push to say, well, if you thought that it originated from China, then you're a conspiracy theorist. And if you say that it's a Wuhan virus or something related to China, then you're a racist. And so now we know that that's completely untangling.
Rick, you bring up a lot of great points. You just mentioned the WHO. With regard to the accord that was being negotiated yesterday, will continue to be negotiated, that essentially gives potentially the authority to determine future pandemics in our country and what measures should be taken. How concerning is this over, future policy regarding pandemics in the United States?
Yeah, well, we can't take this lightly, right? There is a treaty called the International Health Regulations that countries that are members of the WHO have signed up for. Now, that's all good and well when you're sharing of information. And we know that China over the last years has been very reluctant to the point of being detrimental with sharing information to the global community on transmission of viruses. And we know viruses know no boundaries and they cross over. So of course, there's a level of interplay that countries need to work together and participate when you truly have a pandemic the size of COVID. That being said, this cannot be taken lightly. Every country needs to protect their sovereignty. They cannot just give an unelected body, an international governmental organization that has no accountability to the people, and ceding that kind of authority that can then get into the lives of Americans in terms of surveillance, monitoring, tracking, mandatory vaccinations. Every single piece of that treaty needs to be looked upon. And before it's ratified in Congress, I think every member of Congress should read the international health regulations and make sure they know what they're signing up for before they cede any authority to the WHO in the name of pandemic surveillance.
Rick, lastly, before you mentioned how so many people were labeled as conspiracy theorists and all different other labels when they, raised the idea of this lab leak theory. Do you think this type of thing, now recognizing it and an about face here, will give the American people pause over other things, or popular opinion or mainstream media has told them to be true? And has this ultimately eroded the public's trust?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the worst things that's come out of the public health policy is the fact that dissenting opinions has stifled the discourse and discussion that the scientific community normally undertakes when there's a novel scientific matter before them. And this has eroded the integrity of public trust. I mean, you can just look at it objectively. The utilization rates of the vaccine boosters is very low because people are no longer trusting the government's push on many of these policies. And so until we can start to create transparency, we're going to have a hard time rebuilding that integrity we need in our public health systems, which is too bad because some of these agencies should have been the main advisory agencies for the American public, and the Americans should have, with all the taxpayer money that we send to the government, should have a trust in their public health systems. Transparency and accountability is the only way forward now in terms of rebuilding our integrity in our public health systems.
Rick Mehta, as always, really appreciate your perspective.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.